The rope was already resting against her neck when the intoxicated cowboy wandered into town. Molly Thorne stood on the wooden platform in the heart of Bitter Creek's main square. Her hands were tied behind her back, tears rolling down her dirt-smudged cheeks. The noose scratched against her pale skin as Judge Harrison Blackwood pronounced her death sentence to the gathered crowd of perhaps 40 onlookers. She was 23 years old, a seamstress, an orphan, and in a matter of 10 minutes, she would be gone for a crime she never committed. The judge's voice echoed across the square as he declared her guilty of stealing his wife's emerald necklace, a jewel worth more than most people in Bitter Creek would ever see in their entire lives. Molly had been working late in Mrs. Blackwood's parlor, hemming a dress, when the necklace vanished. She was the only person present, the sole suspect, yet Molly knew the truth. She had witnessed Mrs. Blackwood conceal the necklace herself, silently watching through the window as the judge's wife buried it in the garden behind their home. The woman had framed her, but who would trust the word of a poor orphan girl over the judge's spouse? Whispers rippled through the crowd, a mixture of excitement and uneasiness. Some averted their eyes while others stared with grim fascination. Children pressed their faces against the windows of nearby shops. This was Bitter Creek's first public execution in 3 years, and Judge Blackwood was turning it into a spectacle. Molly's knees trembled slightly as the executioner, a slender man named Garrett Wilson, tested the trap door. The wooden plank beneath her feet groaned forebodingly, while her heart pounded so fiercely she could feel it rising in her throat, competing for space with the noose. She shut her eyes tightly and attempted to pray, but no words would form. How could God allow this to happen? She had never stolen a single penny that did not belong to her. Since the age of 14, she had been working 16-hour days, sewing and repairing garments for the town's families, barely managing to gather enough money for a small room above Muller's general store. Judge Harrison Blackwood took out his pocket watch. His icy gray eyes locked with hers for an instant, and she noticed something inside that churned her stomach, a sense of satisfaction. He was taking pleasure in this. The judge snapped his watch closed and nodded toward the executioner. Garrett Wilson's hand moved toward the lever that would open the trap door. Suddenly, the sound of spurs clinking against wooden stairs echoed slowly and deliberately as someone ascended behind the platform. But the intoxicated cowboy making his way up those steps was about to change everything. And what he carried in his saddlebag would transform this execution into an event no one in Bitter Creek would ever forget. Caleb McKinley smelled of whiskey and 3 days spent on the road. His boots hit each step with the uneven rhythm of a man who had spent most of the morning in a saloon located 2 towns away. His battered black hat sat askew on his head, and his brown dust coat was coated in dust and suspicious stains. To all the onlookers, he appeared like just another wanderer who found himself in the wrong place at the wrong moment. But Caleb McKinley's bloodshot eyes, though glazed, absorbed everything with keen awareness. The arrangement of the town's men, the way Judge Harrison Blackwood's hand rested on his firearm, the fear etched on the young woman's face, and above all, how the crowd seemed more terrified than thrilled. He had witnessed enough hangings to sense when something was amiss. Judge Blackwood turned toward the disruption, his face flushing with irritation. He was a large man, well-fed and impeccably dressed, with silver hair and the kind of authority earned after years of deciding life and death without hesitation. "This is a legal proceeding," Blackwood snapped. "Move along, cowboy, or I will have you arrested for disturbing the peace." Caleb wobbled slightly but held his ground. His voice was slurred yet loud enough for all to hear. "Legal? You call this legal?" He gestured broadly toward Molly, nearly losing his balance. "You're about to hang a girl who seems like she has never even harmed a fly. What exactly did this little thing commit?" "Murder. The entire town." The crowd shifted nervously, exchanging uneasy looks. Caleb might have been intoxicated, but he voiced what many thought in silence. Judge Blackwood's jaw tightened. "She is a thief, stole valuable property from my wife. The law on matters like this is clear." "Your wife?" Caleb let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the square. "Well, isn't it convenient for the judge, jury, and victim all to be members of the same household?" Molly stared at this unfamiliar man with disbelief. Throughout the trial, nobody had stood up for her. Not a single soul questioned the judge's version of what happened, yet this drunken cowboy, a complete stranger, was ready to confront the most influential figure in Bitter Creek. Harrison Blackwood advanced toward Caleb with his hand moving to rest on his gun. "I suggest you leave before you end up standing beside her on that platform," the judge warned. But Caleb refused to retreat. Instead, he reached into his coat and revealed an object that caused several people in the crowd to gasp. It was a badge, worn and dented, but undeniably authentic. The expression that crossed Harrison Blackwood's face in that instant made it clear this hanging would turn far more complex. The words Deputy U.S. Marshal were faintly visible on the battered metal, but they were unmistakable. The crowd fell into a hushed silence. Even the children ceased their restless movements behind the windows. The judge's face shifted from a flushed red to a stark pale within a single moment. His hand, which had previously rested confidently on his weapon, now trembled slightly. Caleb slipped the badge back into his coat, but the impact had already been made. "Now then, Judge," he said, his speech still thick but heavier with meaning, "you were just mentioning how the law is clear." Molly felt a flicker of hope for the first time in many days. A federal marshal was here now. Perhaps she had not been forsaken after all. However, Judge Harrison Blackwood recovered swiftly. Years of dealing with corruption had taught him how to manage unexpected challenges. "Marshal or not, you have no authority here. This is a local issue, addressed in a local court under local law." "Local law," Caleb McKinley repeated, wavering as he processed the statement. "Tell me about this trial, Judge. How long did it last? Who spoke for the girl? What proof did you submit?" The questions lingered in the air like smoke. Judge Blackwood silently clenched his jaw for a moment before responding. "She was caught in the act. My wife's necklace was missing, and she was the only person in the house." Caleb's voice rose as he interrupted. "Caught in the act? You mean the necklace was found on her?" "No, no," the judge muttered uncertainly. Caleb stepped closer to the podium, still unsteady from drink, yet his movements carried a certain threat. "So you're telling me you are about to convict this girl over a missing necklace simply because she happened to be in the house?" Rumors stirred within the crowd. Mrs. Patterson, the teacher, whispered to her husband. Old Tom Fletcher removed his hat and scratched his head. Even Sheriff Wade Morrison, standing silently nearby, shifted uneasily. Judge Blackwood narrowed his eyes. "The evidence is sufficient for me." Caleb laughed bitterly, devoid of humor. "Evidence? I have seen stronger evidence at a church pie contest. Where is the necklace now, Judge? Did you search her room or question other witnesses? Or did you simply decide she was guilty because it suited you?" Molly observed this interaction with increasing disbelief. Every question Caleb raised was one that her court-appointed attorney should have asked. Yet Hiram Wells had devoted no more than 10 minutes to her case, failing to inquire or provide a defense. Judge Harrison Blackwood was visibly losing control over the proceedings, and everyone noticed it. His once unchallenged authority, held firm for years, was collapsing before the entire town. "Marshal," he said through clenched teeth, "I do not care what badge you wear. This girl is guilty and she will be hanged." However, Caleb was now reaching into his saddlebag, drawing out something that made Judge Blackwood instinctively step back. What Caleb revealed was not just evidence that could free Molly Thorne. It was proof potent enough to shatter everything Judge Blackwood had established in Bitter Creek. The emerald necklace caught the sunlight of the afternoon, sparkling like green flames. Caleb raised it high so the entire crowd in the square could observe it clearly. The finely crafted gold chain, flawless emerald gems, and the distinctive clasp matched exactly what Mrs. Blackwood had described in great detail during the trial. This is unmistakably the same necklace Molly was accused of stealing, Caleb declared, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. Found it buried in the garden behind the judge's residence about an hour ago. Isn't that an odd place for a stolen necklace to appear? Judge Harrison Blackwood's complexion drained of color. That cannot be true. Are you trying to deceive me? Caleb McKinley's bloodshot eyes locked onto the judge with piercing intensity. Your wife announced to the entire town that this necklace was taken from her jewelry box while Miss Thorne was cleaning your parlor, yet here it lies buried in your garden, wrapped in this. He revealed a piece of fabric, delicate silk, unmistakably from a woman's gown. Several women in the crowd immediately recognized the design. It belonged to one of Mrs. Blackwood's most elegant dresses. Molly felt her legs weaken with relief. She had been correct. She had suspected Mrs. Blackwood would hide something that very night. But when she tried to inform lawyer Garrett Wilson, he brushed off her allegations as grasping at straws. The crowd was now murmuring, voices swelling with bewilderment and outrage. Tom Fletcher stepped forward, his weathered face lined with disgust. Judge, what is the explanation for this? However, Judge Harrison Blackwood held his ground. This man is obviously collaborating with the girl. He planted that proof to protect his partner. His partner. Caleb scoffed, the sound cutting and harsh. Judge, I arrived in this town 20 minutes ago. I have never met this girl in my life, though I have encountered many corrupt officials and you reek of it from miles around. At last, Sheriff Morrison spoke, breaking his silence. Judge, if the necklace was found in your garden, it was not in mine. Blackwood snapped back. This drunkard is fabricating lies. Yet Mrs. Patterson was now raising her voice, her tone calm yet firm, like a schoolteacher addressing the room. Clear and resolute I saw Molly that night, Judge. She came to my home after finishing her work, crying and frightened. She confessed to me she had witnessed something unusual, but was too scared to explain. She told me the same thing Samuel Mueller, the store owner, mentioned. He had also seen something that could put her in danger. The crowd was shifting. Judge Harrison Blackwood felt his grip slipping away, like grains of sand falling from his hands. Years of unquestioned power over decisions were collapsing right before his eyes. None of this matters, he yelled, desperation seeping into his tone. The trial is finished. The verdict has been given. Yet Caleb McKinley was ascending the steps toward the platform, now moving with a surprising steadiness that suggested his intoxication might not have been as complete as it appeared. He reached Molly and began working on the ropes binding her wrists. Step away from the prisoner. Judge Blackwood pulled his weapon, aiming it squarely at Caleb's chest. Silence blanketed the entire square. Even the children watching from the windows froze. That was when Caleb spoke words that would alter everything in Bitter Creek forever and exposed the true reason for his arrival in this remote, forgotten town. I came here for you, Harrison Blackwood. Caleb's voice was completely sober now, every trace of slurred speech gone. He faced the judge directly, unbothered by the gun trained on his chest. 3 years I have been tracking you. 3 years since you vanished from... Carson City was shaken with $50,000 in territorial funds at stake. The crowd exhaled in unison, stunned by the revelation. Judge Harrison Blackwood's expression shifted dramatically from pale to ghostly. You are out of your mind, he exclaimed. I have dedicated 5 years to this community. 5 years under a stolen identity, Caleb McKinley interrupted, his hand inching slowly toward his own weapon. Your true name is Henry Blackstone. You served as territorial treasurer in Nevada until you embezzled government funds and fled west. Molly watched in disbelief as this intense scene unfolded around her. The accusation still hung heavily around her neck, but suddenly her pending execution felt like the least urgent matter in the crowded square. Mrs. Patterson's voice trembled as she spoke again. Is this true? Have we been living under the rule of a criminal? Judge Blackwood's hand holding the gun was now shaking visibly. Lies, all lies, he shouted, clearly desperate. This drunken man is only trying to save his woman. Caleb gave a grim smile. I told you I have never seen her before today, but when I rode into town and found you about to hang an innocent person to hide your wife's theft, that made my job much easier. The truth was becoming clear to everyone watching. Mrs. Blackwood had stolen her own necklace and framed Molly to divert suspicion. Judge Blackwood had pushed through a sham trial to silence the only witness. Yet they had not anticipated a federal marshal arriving exactly at the worst possible time. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward, hand on his own gun. Judge, you need to lower that weapon and face these charges. I am the law in this town, he declared firmly. Blackwood shouted, I am the one who decides who lives and who dies. Yet the crowd was closing in on the platform. Tom Fletcher, Samuel Mueller, Mrs. Patterson, and about a dozen more were ascending the steps. Judge Harrison Blackwood was overwhelmed, outnumbered, outmatched, and running out of choices. If you were Caleb McKinley, what would your next move be? Would you try to calm the desperate judge down, risking harm to innocent bystanders, or would you draw your weapon and end this standoff with force? Share your thoughts in the comments because Caleb's decision was about to shape whether Molly Thorne would witness another sunset. The marshal's hand lingered near his gun handle, his gaze fixed on Judge Blackwood's finger, resting on the trigger. One wrong action from either could turn this rescue into a bloodbath. In that heavy, silent moment, Mrs. Blackwood suddenly appeared at the edge of the square, running toward the platform, shouting words that would crush her husband's last chance of escape and reveal the ultimate, most shocking truth behind what truly happened in Bitter Creek. Harrison, stop! Her voice sliced through the tension like a blade, despite her pristine blue dress and carefully styled hair coming undone. Her tear-streaked face showed desperation. Judge Blackwood's grip on the gun faltered. Elizabeth, retreat to the house, he urged, but she kept moving forward, gasping for air. As she neared the platform, she noticed the letters, Harrison. The girl noticed the letters from Rebecca. The name struck Judge Harrison Blackwood as if it were a physical hit. His expression twisted, and for a moment he appeared more like an elderly man than a stern figure of authority. Caleb McKinley seized the opportunity to ask urgently, "Who is Rebecca, Judge?" Mrs. Blackwood climbed the steps of the platform, openly weeping. "Now she is," she admitted, "Harrison's first wife. In Carson City, he had told everyone that he was a widower, but Rebecca was very much alive." The crowd murmured in disbelief. Bigamy was a grave offense, yet more than that, it meant everything Judge Blackwood had shared about his past was a falsehood. Molly found her voice for the first time since this ordeal began. "I did see letters," she whispered before raising her voice. "When I was working in your parlor, Mrs. Blackwood, I saw you reading letters signed by your loving wife, Rebecca. You caught me looking and got frightened." Mrs. Blackwood nodded sadly. "I knew she would find out sooner or later. Harrison persuaded me to frame her for theft too, just to remove the problem." Judge Blackwood's gun slipped from his hand. The burden of his lies was finally overwhelming him. "Elizabeth, please," he begged, but she shouted back fiercely, "No. I will not allow you to condemn an innocent girl to protect your secrets. I have already helped you steal from the territory. I have already helped you build a new life on deception, but I will not aid you in committing murder." Sheriff Morrison stepped forward and carefully took the gun from Judge Blackwood's hand, which no longer resisted. The fight had completely left him. Caleb swiftly removed the noose that still hung nearby. Molly freed herself by cutting the ropes around her neck and collapsed onto her knees, gasping for air and crying, finally liberated after countless days of horror. "Thank you," she murmured to Caleb. "How did you think to search the garden?" Caleb helped her stand. "I did not. But then I noticed Mrs. Blackwood staring out from her window, wringing her hands as if weighed down by guilt. I suspected she might have hidden something. It was a lucky guess." The crowd was beginning to thin as people whispered angrily about the corruption that had long plagued their town. Sheriff Morrison was arresting both Blackwoods, though Mrs. Blackwood was cooperating fully. Tom Fletcher stepped up to the platform. "Marshal, what happens now?" Caleb glanced at the townsfolk, honest people deceived by a criminal disguised beneath judicial robes. "Now you choose a new judge, a genuine one, and you ensure nothing like this ever recurs." Yet even as the immediate threat subsided, Caleb understood his mission had only just begun. Judge Blackwood's corruption extended beyond the courtroom, and what they were about to uncover in his home would expose a criminal network that spanned well past Bitter Creek. The strongbox hidden beneath Judge Blackwood's bed held enough proof to convict many men. Caleb and Sheriff Morrison combed through the residence while the Blackwoods sat confined in jail. What lay beneath was a meticulously organized, illegal operation that had, for many years, forged land deeds and stolen cattle brands had been in operation. Court documents and exchanges with criminals spanned 3 different territories. However, it was the leather-bound journal concealed beneath a false compartment that made Caleb's blood run cold. "Morrison, look at this," he called out, his voice tight with fury. The sheriff glanced over Caleb's shoulder while the marshal read aloud the judge's handwriting. Entry after entry exposed bribes accepted, verdicts purchased, and innocent people wrongfully sent to prison or worse. The Molly Thorne case was not an isolated incident. It was standard practice. Softly, Mary Morrison whispered, "How many people has he condemned?" Caleb flipped through countless pages. "At least 30 cases are listed here, probably more." He stopped on one entry that caused his jaw to clench. 2 years ago, a Mexican family was accused of cattle rustling. The father and eldest son were hanged, while the mother and children were sold into indentured servitude. Morrison's face turned pale. "The Hernandez family. I remember that case. I always felt something was off about it." Meanwhile, in another part of town, Molly sat inside Samuel Mueller's store, still wearing the same dress she had nearly died in, struggling to take in everything that had happened. Mrs. Mueller had brought her soup and coffee, but her hands trembled too much to hold the cup steadily. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up," Molly said softly, "that I will still be in that cell waiting to die." Mrs. Mueller gently patted her hand. "You are safe now, dear. The monster cannot harm you anymore." Yet Molly's sense of relief was blended with a rising anger. How many others were not as fortunate as I was? How many innocent people perished because of his deceit? This question tormented everyone in Bitter Creek, a town they believed they understood, but that was actually founded on corruption and murder. Judge Harrison Blackwood had not only been embezzling funds, he had been stealing lives as well. When Caleb McKinley returned from the search, he found Molly sitting on the store's porch, gazing out at the square where she had nearly lost her life. The gallows still stood there, a grim symbol of how close she had come to becoming just another casualty. "Miss Thorne," he said, taking off his hat, "I want to apologize." She looked up at him, puzzled. "Apologize? You saved my life." I should have been here earlier. I should have stopped him before so many got hurt. Caleb's voice carried the weight of guilt. I have been tracking him for 3 years, and during that time you cannot save everyone, he admitted softly. Molly replied quietly, But you saved me, and now you can save the rest. He is still causing harm. Caleb nodded solemnly. Still, the sorrow for the lives lost would remain with him forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon over Bitter Creek, the town faced an uncertain path ahead. However, for the first time in years, this future was grounded in truth rather than lies. 3 hours later, Judge Harrison Blackwood confessed everything. Confronted with undeniable evidence and the full cooperation of his wife, he completely broke down inside his jail cell. The sheriff, Morrison, documented every single word as Harrison Blackwood laid out years filled with deceit, robbery, and homicide. Federal officials would require every admission to undo the harm he had caused. Caleb stood outside the prison at sunset, smoking a cigarette while observing the townspeople gather in small huddles, quietly discussing their uncertain future. Tom Fletcher came up to him, accompanied by several others. Marshal Fletcher said, "We want to properly thank you." "Just doing my duty," Caleb responded, but he shook each man's hand firmly. "What will become of the town now?" Samuel Muller asked. "Half our legal rulings over the past 5 years were made by a criminal. A new judge will be assigned by the territorial governor, a genuine one this time, and a commission will examine every case Blackwood managed." Caleb dropped his cigarette, grinding it under his boot. "It will take time, but justice will prevail." Molly appeared from Mrs. Muller's shop carrying a small bundle of her few belongings. She had chosen to leave Bitter Creek. Too many painful memories lingered in every street of the town. "Where are you heading?" Caleb inquired. "San Francisco, perhaps, or Denver, somewhere I can start over." She looked at him with heartfelt appreciation. "I will always remember what you did for me, Marshal McKinley," she said. He corrected her. "Caleb. I hope your new life brings you everything you deserve." She smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. "And you? What about you?" "Back to chasing criminals," he replied. Caleb glanced back at the jail where Judge Harrison Blackwood was confined, waiting to be taken to a federal penitentiary. "Actually, I think I might stay here for some time," he said. "I want to assist the new judge in untangling this chaos and ensure the victims receive true justice." As the stars began to twinkle above, Sheriff Morrison came out to join them on the street. He brought news from the territorial capital. "They are sending a prosecutor next week to start reviewing all the cases. This process could take several months to complete." "That is good," Caleb responded. "The families of those innocent souls deserve to know the truth. Mrs. Blackwood will face charges, but her sentence is likely to be reduced due to her cooperation. As for Judge Blackwood, he will spend the rest of his life in a federal prison if he manages to avoid the gallows for his crimes. The corrupt empire he built in Bitter Creek is now finished." 6 months later, Molly Thorne opened her own sewing shop in Denver, gaining a reputation for her kindness towards other young women in need. She never married, but lived a long and peaceful life surrounded by friends who cherished her gentle nature. Caleb McKinley stayed in Bitter Creek for 2 years, helping to rebuild the town's legal system. Eventually, he became the territorial marshal for the entire region, dedicated to rooting out corruption wherever he found it. Sheriff Morrison acted as the interim judge until a permanent replacement arrived, proving himself to be just and honest in every decision. The choice he made, along with the gallows in Bitter Creek's town square, was dismantled the very next day. Its wooden beams were burned in a large fire visible for miles around. This act became a clear sign that justice, rather than revenge, would govern their town from that moment on. If you found this tale of bravery in the face of corruption inspiring, Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary stories from the Old West. Now, tap the video on your screen to hear a narrative even more captivating than this one, featuring a twist so intense it will stay with you for a long time. Click the video and enjoy.